So welcome to a brief video under the banner of standardised work, and in particular today I'm going to be talking about best practice, creating standard operating procedures. In a previous video I talked about standardised work and its various components, and one of the particular important components was standard operating procedures. And we know that standardised work will bring significant improvements to business performance. What is a standard operating procedure? It's a step-by-step set of instructions compiled to help people carry out complex but ultimately routine operations. It allows us to instruct people to execute business processes that contain multiple steps but using a single document. They aim to minimise variation by improving efficiency, quality, productivity. They improve communication, minimise confusion by being a reference point. They're easily understood, simple format, using diagrams and pictures. They're easily accessible, available close to the workstation. They simplify training because they're connected to training and skills assessment. They include cross-functional contribution, various stakeholders from different departments, and they also include an approval and version control mechanism. So I encourage you with a standard operating procedure to check the strength of the procedure by applying a simple test. So we want to avoid the writer being the only one able to understand and follow the process. We want to build the document collaboratively, and we want to make sure that the procedure is meaningful and easily understood. And we can check the strength of the procedure by asking those outside of the department to review the document and provide feedback and amend if the document is vague or confusing. And then we should consider a review mechanism, either routine or scheduled, to ensure the document is up to date. So this is a typical standard operating procedure, and there's a couple of components that I want to bring to light today. First one is the header. Now the header talks about the name of the document, what it refers to, and then the footer is where we do the document control aspect, the date of review and who owns the document. Then the internal components of the standard operating procedure, the columns. So the first column is the procedure overview, so the different aspects of the procedure that allows us as a quick reference. And then the second column is the detail on the procedure. So the very first part of the procedure, we need to have the PPE and the safety aspects. This is where we can symbolise the required safety components, and these also have reference to external safety procedures if necessary. Then as we work through the document, we could even have detailed equipment that's required for the procedure. We could have even pre-operating safety checks, and then we can have the main body of the procedure where all the details written, and particularly as it shows here, we have very few words, so very basic dot points, but descriptive photos and references. So that's the standard operating procedure. Now we can also include machine settings. So as a part of operating a particular process, we can also have the startup or prior to startup machine settings. We can have machine settings that go through the particular procedure. We can also have the adjustments, machine setting and adjustments as we work through the particular procedure. Now we can also have different ways to set up the machine settings, but we're going to make sure that the machine settings in the procedure are absolutely clear. But please avoid adding too much detail to make the procedure too confusing. Now we can also add quality checks as we work through the procedure. We could have step-by-step quality checks that are part of the procedure, or we could have quality checks towards the end. Then we can also include within the procedure references to maintenance, or vice versa. In our maintenance review service setup, we can have reference to procedures or part of the procedures. So in this particular case, when we're doing our service, we can make sure that we're doing a service that's connected to a certain part of the SOP. How do we connect the SOP into our organisation? So this is the standard operating procedure that I showed before. We can connect it by the first thing we do is creating a skills matrix. So a skills matrix is fundamentally a training record to show where the SOP is going to be used. So a typical way of setting up a skills matrix, we have a list of SOPs across the top. We have a vertical list of the people that are involved in these procedures, And then the main body of the skills matrix, we have the required skill, or even color coding an indicated attained skill. And then we have a training record where we link the SOP and the skills matrix to a training record. Training record has all the employee details, the name, department, and even the role of the employee. The required SOPs that particular person needs to be competent on, and then step-by-step signing off from each procedure, and then the final sign-off review at the end. Now that can form part of our training program. So the SOP, skills matrix, training record could be the key components in our training program. It could also be the key components in our induction program. And then we need to wrap this all up with a register of documents, which I'll mention in a minute. So I just want to cover one more aspect related to the SOP, and that aspect is the 1-point lesson. So by definition, a 1-point lesson is a single-page document which focuses on one particular step of the SOP where we've acknowledged a failure to adhere to the SOP, or we've seen a gap that we need to reinforce or strengthen. It contains document control aspects, and it's a standard format across the organisation. It also is complementary to the SOP, not replacing it. And it always resides at the workstation for easy access, and so all the team members can see it. Now, what does a 1-point lesson look like? This is a typical format of the 1-point lesson. And as mentioned before, from the SOP, we've got a part of the SOP that's used to create the 1-point lesson. Now, there's some aspects of the 1-point lesson that I'll describe in a little bit more detail. The first one is the header. So we know this document is a 1-point lesson. The document details is what the document refers to, the 1-point lesson number, the references, date, and the title. And then we've also got in the body of the 1-point lesson some photos or diagrams that is going to simply explain the aspect or the reference of the 1-point lesson. And then a few words, a little bit of instruction, concise, so we know what the 1-point lesson is telling us. And then at the bottom, there's some reference material, the SOP numbers, document owner, and reviewer. As mentioned earlier, the 1-point lesson and the SOPs need to be contained in a register. This is a typical example of a register where we've had the categories, we have the name of the documents, we have the owner, we have the version, and we have the date. So when we look at this particular document, we can see that this one is the most recent document when we refer back to the register. So that brings us to the end of this short video about standardized work, and in particular best practice in creating standard operating procedures. And as mentioned a few times, it's standard operating procedures that are going to bring a significant improvement to our productivity as an organisation. Thank you.